Hey guys, it's Misty from the Book Rat, and welcome back to another book chat. The topic of today's chat is one I've actually been wanting to talk about for quite some time now. All of this year and probably even towards the end of last year I've been thinking about this one and kind of intending to chat with you guys about it. And that is sort of book trends and what I think is the trend of 2016, and that is dark, gritty YA. Now, trends are cyclical and set in place pretty much years in advance. I mean, publishers have to know what they're putting out years from now because it takes so long to get a book from the stage that it's bought from an agent to the stage that it's on your shelves. That process is a long one, which means authors have to be even more ahead of the trend because they kind of have to know where the trends are likely to go and what publishers are likely to be looking for and wanting to buy. But if you kind of look at it, you can predict a little bit because things are cyclical. So you're going to have a big boom in fantasy where people want to escape and it's a fun, colorful, exciting world, whatever. Then you'll start getting people who are like, well, this is a little too fun and colorful, and the dystopian aspects will start creeping in, and then you'll have these really doom and gloom books, and then some people will say, okay, well, I'm over dystopian, I want something contemporary, and then you'll get, you know, either the fluffy contemporary or kids dying of cancer contemporary, and then when people start to get sick of that, it evolves to the next thing. And so it's constantly this cycle of, this book was good, I want a million more of this, to I'm so sick of this, why is everything this plot line, give me something new. New thing comes along, it starts all over, and it just cycles through, and eventually you get back to fantasy and back to dystopia and back to contemporary, and it just goes on and on. Right now, kind of coming off the heels of not really run-of-the-mill contemporary, but relatable kind of everyday life, whether fluffy and happy or sad and depressing, we're starting to get into the darker, grittier contemporary, and seeing it creep kind of across genre lines into fantasy and things like that. Now, this is nothing new. Horror stories and mystery novels and true crime, these things have been around for ages and they will continue to be around. There's sort of a cultural hunger for them that just grows every now and then. So you used to have things like unsolved mysteries. I mean, we have entire channels devoted to true crime 24/7, and we have a constant barrage of things filling up our Facebook and Twitter feeds and things like that. So it's not like this is anything new, but the approach to it is what I'm finding is the sort of trend of 2016. It's not so much the unsolved mysteries or the sort of torture porn of past mysteries and crime novels. Now we're starting to get into wanting to pick apart the gray area and really see who is the villain of the piece, and that I think is where 2016 is really making its mark. Now again, this is something that's kind of been growing and building for a while. You have things like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or anything by Gillian Flynn. These stories already have a place in, you know, the cultural zeitgeist, and to an extent have already had a place in YA, but both culturally and in YA, you're starting to really see it coming to the forefront. So from things in media like Making a Murderer and The Jinx, or the popularity of Serial, which was a podcast which no one really expected to blow up and did in a big way, these things that kind of analyze not only these horrific things that can happen, but also our own biases and maybe how we either allow ourselves to peg the wrong person or won't allow ourselves to see what's right in front of our faces, or to see how gray things are and how hard to pin down they are, and to see the good that's in the bad person and the bad that's in the good person. That is really starting to come to the forefront. Now, it's something that I started noticing. I mean, I've been seeing it growing for a while, but you really started to see it when catalogs came out from publishers, probably starting about last summer. Suddenly, where it used to be a lot more fantasy or a lot more regular contemporary, you started seeing all of a publisher's list almost be pretty similar and all on this kind of darker, grittier contemporary trend. I talked about it a little bit right at the beginning of this year because when I was putting up my January TBR, I talked about how I thought this was going to be the year of the dark and the gritty books, because at least two, I don't remember everything that was in that TBR, but at least two of the books, The Killing Jar and After the Woods, had that dark and gritty and who is really the villain type of vibe. And it's continued on with books like The Darkest Corners, and one that's coming up in a TBR pretty soon and will be coming out this summer, The Darkest Lie by Pintip Dunn. We're starting to see more of those, not just being onesie-twosie books that are being released, but they're filling the catalogs. They are what is coming out right now. You know, we're seeing more kind of serial and Making a Murderer inspired approaches in analyzing a crime, analyzing something that's already happened and has already been decided in people's minds, like The Darkest Corners, which I will link my review of because I thought it was really fantastic. But this is something where the main events have taken place quite a while ago, and as with many of these real-life cases, as you get some distance from it, and as you get better technology or better ways to analyze things, or more people coming forward, more people starting to question things, or more incidents happening further down the line where you're like, wait a minute, you start to kind of look back at these past cases and say, did that play out the way I thought it played out? Did I contribute to this bad thing? Or books like After the Woods, where the main character, again, thinks that they know what happened and what went down, and starts to realize that the life that they thought they knew and the things, the events that they thought they were a part of didn't happen the way they thought, and that maybe the good guys aren't as good and shining white as they thought they were, and that the bad guys are a little more gray and not as mustache-twirling villainous as they had been perceived and as they had been taken for being. In both of these books, you really have a question of who the real good guys are and who the real bad guys are. The Killing Jar starts with the main character murdering someone as a small child, so there's really a lot more blurring of lines. Even down to sort of whimsical and quirky books like Winged Poppy Midnight, you've got a whole plot that revolves around who is the real villain of this piece. Is anything that you know, is any narration, is any piece of supposed fact something that you can even trust? There's a lot of playing with perception in these books, and a lot of picking apart sort of cultural biases, but also reader biases, because you can be led to believe one way, same as you would be if you were watching a documentary about a crime or on a jury. You're being led along by these prosecutors and these defense attorneys to follow their storyline, but you don't actually know what happened. And you have your own biases and preconceived notions that are going to make you more predisposed to believe either this thing or that thing. So a lot of books are starting to really tackle that and pick that apart and play with the reader's concept of what happened and what they are likely to believe and who they're likely to side with, and then kind of turning it on them and making them really not only question the book and the characters, but also themselves, which is really an interesting thing that I'm seeing in this sort of dark and gritty trend. It goes beyond even that, though. It goes beyond just the delving into the gray area and playing with preconceived notions into just a general rise of sort of crime stories and, you know, serial killers, abductions, things like that. Revenge stories and the rise of the anti-hero, which again you see in a lot of fiction. Revenge, How to Get Away with Murder, Scandal, all of these things that are about some pretty dubious, ambiguously good, quite possibly bad characters. You're starting to see more of that creeping in, seeing more cults in books and issues of control, whether it be religious and cultural or, you know, abusive home situations, whatever it is. You're starting to see it pervade whole swaths of media. It's not just the crime stories and the mysteries, but even fantasies are starting to have these elements and take more of these approaches, these sort of gray area, dark, gritty approaches that leave you questioning, that have unreliable narrators, that allow you to follow someone who's not necessarily a good guy. Again, it's not something that we haven't seen before, but the prevalence of it, I think, is really kind of taken over 2016. You know, and now that we're halfway through 2016, I can say it's still going strong, and I've seen it kind of being fulfilled. We do have a huge, huge trend and sort of cultural hunger for these types of stories. So those are my thoughts on what I am deeming the trend of 2016. Definitely want to know what you guys think. Do you agree that it is the thing right now? And do you like it if it is? Or do you think that there's another contender? Is something else kind of taking over and will be the trend of 2016? And beyond that, where do you see it going in the future? Once we're done with gritty and dark and ambiguous, where are we moving on to? What do you see being the trend of 2017 or 2018? Or what would you like to see? But those are my thoughts. That's all for this book chat. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments and your recommendations for books that fit this trend, for great, gritty, gray, and questionable, whether it's YA or TV shows or whatever it is. Leave your thoughts and your recommendations and your faves in the comments. And of course, if you have topics that you would like to see covered on Book Chat, please leave me some recommendations and I will do my best. As for my part, I will leave a list of all of the things that I mentioned in the description, as well as links to reviews and videos about them if I have talked about them in the past. And keep an eye out for this one because I will be reading and talking about it soon. But that is all for now. As always, thanks for watching and happy reading!